What if I told you McLaren, once untouchable, is now on the brink of collapse? What if I told you Baku 2025 turned from coronation into catastrophe in just one weekend? What if I told you Andrea Stella, calm and measured, has snapped, warning his drivers not one more mistake? And what if I told you Max Verstappen is now the storm chasing down their fading title dream? Picture this: McLaren, the team that rebuilt itself into a modern powerhouse, standing at the edge of greatness. 9 points, that was all they needed in Baku to mathematically seal back-to-back Constructors' Championships. 9 points from a season that had been painted orange with dominance. Yet, instead of celebration, disaster struck. Their perfect machine cracked. Their calm, calculated leader Andrea Stella broke character. His words cut sharper than any rival, not one more mistake. For fans who thought McLaren's glory was untouchable, that single phrase echoed like thunder. It began with Oscar Piastri, the golden prodigy, the man who conquered Baku in 2024. Expectations were sky-high. Yet, the weekend unraveled instantly. A crash in qualifying forced a chassis change. On race day, nerves betrayed him, a jumped start, anti-stall chaos, and finally a crash into the Turn 5 barriers. In one afternoon, his record streak of 34 consecutive points finishes collapsed. From hero to cautionary tale, Piastri embodied the fragility of Formula One's finest talents. Then came Lando Norris, the senior statesman of McLaren, given the chance to rescue the weekend. But under pressure, even he faltered. A mistake in qualifying left him starting 7th, the worst possible place on Baku's narrow streets. In the race, another pit stop disaster, 4.1 seconds of paralysis robbed him of momentum. Trapped behind traffic, he stayed locked in 7th until the checkered flag. For a team chasing history, the sight was shocking. 2 drivers, 1 weekend, 0 points. Baku turned from coronation into humiliation. And in the background, like a shadow rising, stood Max Verstappen. Just weeks ago, he was written off over 100 points behind, seemingly out of the fight. But now, after back-to-back wins in Monza and Baku, the gap has shrunk to 69. The predator is closing. Stella himself admitted the truth: Max is in the fight. Write it in capital letters. For McLaren, the nightmare is not only their mistakes, it is Verstappen feeding on every one of them. The title race has reopened, and the hunter smells blood. What makes Stella's ultimatum so explosive is the tone. Andrea Stella, known for calm composure, rarely raises his voice. Yet in Baku, he snapped. His message was brutal: our margin for error is gone. Those words were not aimed at rivals, they were aimed at Norris and Piastri. It was a warning, a threat, and a challenge rolled into one. McLaren, once masters of efficiency, now demand perfection from 2 drivers whose confidence has been shaken to its core. The pressure is no longer invisible, it is written in bold. So now the scandal is clear. McLaren, the team that looked unstoppable, is suddenly vulnerable. The constructor's crown is not yet lost, but it is slipping. Their rivals smell weakness, Verstappen is surging, and the season that seemed destined for dominance could crumble in the final act. And the ultimatum could not be clearer: Norris, Piastri, no more errors. Not one more. The next race will not only test their speed. It will test their nerve, their resilience, and their ability to carry the weight of McLaren's future. The question is, can they handle it? Baku was meant to be McLaren's crowning jewel, the race where they would confirm their supremacy with mathematical certainty. 9 points were all that stood between them and back-to-back constructors' titles. Yet, from the very first laps of practice, warning signs appeared. Both Norris and Piastri kissed the walls during free practice, uncharacteristic errors that hinted at nerves. In qualifying, the cracks became visible. Oscar Piastri, last year's winner on these streets, crashed heavily in Q3, forcing the team into a frantic chassis rebuild overnight. Instead of a weekend of celebration, McLaren's mechanics worked through the night to patch up damage that should never have happened. The tone had shifted. Baku was no longer about sealing glory, it had become about survival. For Piastri, the race itself was a brutal collapse of composure. The lights went out, and instead of launching forward, his MCL39 lurched into chaos. A jump start triggered the anti-stall system, dropping him down the order before turn 1. Already rattled, he fought desperately to recover but misjudged his braking into turn 5. The result was catastrophic, a crash that ended his race before it had even begun. Just like that, Piastri's record streak of 34 consecutive points finishes was gone, erased in the very place where he had once conquered. In one afternoon, the man hailed as McLaren's rising superstar looked suddenly fallible, reminding the paddock how quickly fortune can turn in Formula One. Norris, expected to pick up the mantle, did little better. His qualifying error, clipping the wall on his hot lap, left him starting 7th, far from the sharp end where McLaren had dominated all season. In the race, the strategy left him stranded, and then came the pit stop. 4.1 seconds of hesitation, mechanics scrambling, a wheel gun faltering. By the time he rejoined, his chance of advancing was gone. Stuck behind midfield traffic, unable to unlock the car's pace, he spent the rest of the afternoon staring at the rear wing ahead of him. 7th at the flag was all he could manage. For a team chasing history, it was humiliation, one driver in the wall, the other trapped in anonymity. The real sting of Baku was not just the 0 points, it was the opportunity lost. This was supposed to be the race where McLaren closed the book on the constructors' fight, a weekend of champagne and headlines. Instead, the narrative flipped overnight. Their rivals saw vulnerability, their fans saw collapse, and Max Verstappen saw blood. The symbolism was devastating. McLaren, the team that had executed flawlessly all season, crumbled at the very moment when victory was within reach. The disaster of Baku will not be remembered as a footnote. It will be remembered as the weekend that reopened the championship and shattered the illusion of McLaren's invincibility. Just weeks ago, Max Verstappen's title hopes looked finished. Over 100 points behind, his campaign seemed destined to fade into a quiet fight for podiums while McLaren marched unchallenged to glory. But Formula One has a way of reviving giants, and Verstappen is nothing if not a predator. In Monza, the cathedral of speed, he silenced doubters with a lights-to-flag victory, reminding everyone of the ruthless precision that built his dynasty. And then came Baku. Pole position, faultless execution, and a dominant win while both McLarens imploded. Suddenly, the gap that once looked insurmountable shrank to 69 points. Verstappen's revival was no longer a dream. It was happening, and the paddock could feel the shift. Andrea Stella, normally measured to the point of understatement, did not hide his alarm. His words were as sharp as they were deliberate: Max is in the Drivers' Championship fight. Write it in capital letters. Coming from the man leading McLaren's charge, it was both a warning and an admission. Verstappen's back-to-back victories weren't anomalies, they were proof that Red Bull's RB21 upgrades had unlocked new potential across very different circuits. High-speed Monza, tight and unforgiving Baku, the car worked in both. For McLaren, this was terrifying. Verstappen wasn't just scoring wins, he was dismantling the narrative of their inevitable dominance. The psychological impact cannot be overstated. Verstappen has built his reputation on relentlessness, on hunting down opponents who dare to falter. McLaren's Baku collapse was the kind of weakness he thrives upon. Every mistake from Norris or Piastri now feels amplified because Verstappen is waiting to pounce. Fans and pundits alike have seen this movie before, the Dutchman closing gaps, erasing advantages, and turning pressure into inevitability. For McLaren, the threat is no longer hypothetical. The hunter is back, and the prey is visibly shaking. If Baku was McLaren's disaster, it was also Verstappen's resurrection. The championship fight is alive again, and it has teeth. The wreckage of Baku was not just measured in broken carbon fiber or lost points, it was psychological. For months, McLaren had projected calm dominance, their drivers free to race as equals, their leadership insisting balance was sacred. But the implosion in Azerbaijan tore that philosophy apart. Jacques Villeneuve, never one to mince words, delivered the harshest verdict: if Verstappen keeps closing, McLaren must choose. Piastri becomes number 1. His advice carried the weight of history. Titles are rarely won with two equal drivers. Ferrari had to back Schumacher, Red Bull had to back Vettel, Mercedes had to back Hamilton. Villeneuve's message was clear: McLaren's dream of harmony may already be unsustainable. Inside the garage, that dilemma gnaws at everything. Andrea Stella has championed equality, insisting Norris and Piastri push each other without preference. But equality is a luxury only afforded to teams without predators at their door. With Verstappen slicing the gap, Stella knows the clock is ticking. Every mistake now feeds the narrative that one driver must be sacrificed for the greater good. Piastri's collapse in Baku, Norris's clumsy qualifying and pit stop woes, the evidence mounts, and the pressure builds. The team faces an agonizing choice: stick to ideals or pivot to pragmatism. And either decision risks fracturing the unity that brought them this far. For Norris and Piastri themselves, the crisis is personal. Both know their careers are under the microscope, their reputations shaped not by one good weekend, but by one catastrophic error. Piastri must prove Baku was an aberration, not the start of decline. Norris must show he can deliver under fire, not just when the car is dominant. Stella's post-race ultimatum, "Our margins for error are gone," was not just a tactical note. It was a psychological gauntlet. Every lap from now until the end of the season carries the weight of expectation, of redemption, of survival. McLaren's greatest weapon, its calm cohesion, is in danger of turning into its greatest weakness. And Verstappen, ever the predator, is watching the cracks form. Behind the drama of crashes and errors lurked something even more worrying for McLaren. The MCL39 itself looked fragile. On paper, it has been the class of the field all season. But in Baku, its weaknesses were brutally exposed. The car struggled in dirty air, losing grip and overheating when trapped behind slower rivals. Its straight-line speed deficit became glaring on the long boulevard straight, where DRS and slipstream should have delivered easy passes. Instead, Norris was stuck in traffic, unable to make progress. In a city where opportunism is everything, the MCL39 looked blunt, incapable of carving through the pack. For a machine built to dominate, this was a rude awakening. McLaren's success had masked its flaws, but Baku revealed them under the harshest spotlight. And then came the pit stops, the most basic execution point for any top team. Norris suffered another botched service, his second in as many races. This time, the delay was 4.1 seconds, but in modern Formula One that is an eternity. While rivals like Red Bull and Ferrari routinely hit the 2-second mark, McLaren looked clumsy, their choreography breaking down under pressure. Andrea Stella did not sugarcoat it, there is performance available through pit stops. Races are tighter than ever. His admission was an alarm bell. In an era where championships are decided by millimeters and fractions of seconds, McLaren is bleeding time in the pits. For fans, it was painful déjà vu, the kind of errors that used to haunt this team a decade ago, resurfacing at the worst possible moment. The pit stop chaos is more than a technical glitch, it is a psychological wound. Drivers lose trust when their crew falters. Norris, who should have emerged in clear air, instead rejoined behind traffic, his rhythm broken, his frustration obvious. The mechanics, under scrutiny, will now carry that pressure into every stop that follows. Each wheel gun, each release signal, will feel heavier. Formula One is as much about precision as speed, and McLaren's margin for error is already razor-thin. If they cannot fix this systemic flaw, Verstappen will not need to rely on McLaren's drivers cracking, the team itself will hand him opportunities on a silver platter. In Baku, it was not just the drivers who blinked. The entire operation faltered, reminding the paddock that perfection at McLaren is now an aspiration, not a guarantee. Andrea Stella's words after Baku cut through the noise with surgical precision: "Our margins for error are gone." For a man known for calm restraint, it was as close to an explosion as McLaren has heard in years. It was not a casual warning, it was an ultimatum. To Norris and Piastri, the message was unmistakable: perfection is now the only currency. No more clumsy qualifying laps, no more botched launches, no more pit stop chaos. The constructor's crown that seemed inevitable only weeks ago now teeters on the edge. Every mistake is no longer an isolated error, it is a direct invitation for Max Verstappen to close the gap. And Stella made it clear, McLaren cannot afford to open that door again. The next battleground is Singapore, a circuit that does not forgive. Narrow walls, endless corners, brutal humidity, it is a venue that exposes weakness and magnifies pressure. For Piastri, it will be a trial by fire. He must prove that Baku was not the beginning of a downward spiral, but a one-off collapse. A clean, disciplined performance under the lights of Marina Bay is his only path to redemption. For Norris, Singapore represents something different, the chance to assert himself as McLaren's leader. If he can deliver a flawless weekend, he may tilt the internal balance in his favor. But if he falters again, the team's philosophy of equality will be tested to its breaking point. And beyond Singapore, the horizon is no less daunting. Suzuka, Austin, Mexico, Brazil, each circuit with its own traps, its own opportunities for Verstappen to strike. The season that once looked like a coronation for McLaren now feels like a siege. Every weekend is a battlefield, every lap a test of nerve. Stella's ultimatum is not just about avoiding mistakes, it is about embracing the weight of expectation, carrying the burden of history without cracking under it. Norris and Piastri are no longer simply racing rivals. They are racing against Verstappen, against time, and against their own fragility. The question now is not whether McLaren has the fastest car. It is whether their drivers, and their team as a whole, can withstand the pressure long enough to finish the job.